On Wednesday, November 12, Ukraine's political landscape was rocked by an unprecedented event that has since become the subject of intense scrutiny and debate across the nation. In a series of dramatic developments, both the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Justice tendered their resignations in the wake of a sprawling corruption and bribery scandal, the magnitude of which has left many questioning the integrity of state institutions and the future trajectory of Ukraine's governance. This scandal centers on allegations of corruption involving a staggering $100 million, with Timur Mindich, co-owner of a renowned production company established by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, emerging as the central figure in the controversy. The abrupt resignations, handed in at a time when Ukraine continues to face multifaceted challenges on the domestic and international fronts, have not only rattled the corridors of power but also raised critical questions about the country's commitment to clean governance and transparent public service. The political pulse of Ukraine, long burdened by legacies of corruption and political volatility, now finds itself at a crossroads, where the outcomes of these resignations could signal the beginning of a long-overdue reform process, or conversely, risk plunging the government into further instability. In today's detailed exploration of this seismic shift, we aim to dissect the chain of events that led to this crisis, analyze the official statements and verified statistics emerging from government sources, and reflect on the profound implications for Ukraine's energy sector, the public's trust in its leadership, and the nation's standing on the international stage. The scandal, which has drawn wide public attention and international media coverage, began with meticulous investigations into financial transactions that implicated several high-ranking officials connected to key state-run enterprises. According to official disclosures from the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, an inquiry opened in the previous months uncovered multiple irregularities amounting to nearly $100 million in alleged bribery payments. In what can only be described as a dramatic turn of events, the evidence pointed toward a network of illicit dealings that involved the awarding of contracts and manipulation of tender processes. At the center of this network was Timur Mindich, whose role in the production company founded under the watchful eyes of President Zelenskyy raised eyebrows from the very start. As investigations deepened, it became evident that Mindich's ties to influential figures in government had created a vulnerability, a weak link exploited by unscrupulous intermediaries looking to channel bribes into high-stakes governmental decisions. With every unfolding detail, more questions emerged regarding the oversight mechanisms that allowed such substantial sums to circulate unchecked. The resignation of the energy and justice ministers, therefore, is not merely an isolated response to a single scandal but represents the culmination of growing public outcry and mounting evidence of systemic corruption that has, for years, threatened to undermine the very foundations of Ukraine's political system. The ministers, in their joint statement submitted to the president, cited a deep sense of personal responsibility for the breach of public trust as the catalyst behind their decision to step down, a decision that has reverberated deeply among government circles and in the hearts of ordinary Ukrainian citizens who have long demanded accountability and transparency. In the intricate web of political and economic interests that characterize modern Ukraine, the involvement of Timur Mindich has injected an added layer of complexity and scandal into an already volatile situation. While Mindich is primarily known for his business ventures, his role as co-owner of the production company established by President Zelenskyy has placed him under extraordinary scrutiny. Over the past several months, investigative reports have detailed how funds allegedly earmarked for legitimate business expansion were diverted and used in schemes that manipulated contracts to favor certain bidders in exchange for lucrative kickbacks. Documents recovered during the investigation reveal that over 150 separate financial transactions, collectively amounting to close to $100 million, bore marks of irregularities, with several high-ranking officials allegedly complicit in facilitating the misappropriation of public funds for private gain. Many have pointed to these revelations as a testament to the endemic corruption that continues to plague Ukrainian public institutions, a corruption that has historically impeded efforts at reform and stunted the nation's socio-economic progress. The production company, which had enjoyed considerable success and was seen as a beacon of cultural and economic modernity within Ukraine, now stands as a symbol of how the intersection between business and politics can lead to the erosion of ethical standards. In interviews with several experts on Ukrainian political affairs, one analyst noted that the corruption scandal involving Mindich is just the tip of the iceberg. It exposes a systemic failure that has persisted for decades and suggests that without radical reforms, the cycle of nepotism and bribery is likely to continue unabated. With mounting evidence and increasing demands for accountability resonating from both the public and key political factions, the subsequent resignations of the energy and justice ministers are a stark indicator that change is not only necessary but imminent. This unfolding drama has thus become emblematic of a broader struggle within Ukraine, one that pits a desire for rapid modernization and democratic accountability against entrenched networks of corruption that have long thrived in the shadows of power. The immediate fallout from the ministers' resignations has been both swift and severe. Within hours of the announcement, several key figures in the political arena, ranging from senior government officials to opposition leaders, issued statements condemning the corruption and demanding an independent inquiry. In Kyiv, the atmosphere was thick with a mix of anxiety and cautious optimism as citizens gathered in major public squares, their murmurs of discontent melding with calls for systemic reform. The Justice Minister, whose portfolio had included oversight of several high-profile legal reforms aimed at curbing corruption, was widely regarded as a pivotal player in the battle against impunity. Her departure, therefore, has been interpreted by many as not only a loss for Ukraine's rule of law but also an ominous sign that the battle for a transparent judicial system is fraught with peril. Similarly, the energy minister's resignation has raised alarms in a sector that has long been the backbone of Ukraine's economic stability, yet remains vulnerable to political manipulation. Industry experts point out that Ukraine's energy infrastructure, already strained by the demands of modernization and the pressures of external political conflicts, could face further uncertainty amid what is now perceived as an era of governmental instability. An official spokesperson from the Ministry of Energy acknowledged that while immediate measures are being put in place to stabilize the sector, the long-term implications remain difficult to predict. Throughout state-run media and on widely circulated press briefings, there has been an insistence on the need for a thorough investigation that will travel to the very depths of the corruption network, leaving no stone unturned. Nonetheless, for many Ukrainian citizens, the resignation of these prominent ministers is an affirmation that the long-awaited moment of accountability has finally dawned, even as it lays bare deep-seated cracks in a system that many had hoped was on the precipice of genuine reform. Beyond the immediate political repercussions, this scandal is poised to have enduring effects on Ukraine's energy sector and its broader governance framework. In discussions held among policy experts and industry leaders, the resignation of the ministers is seen as symptomatic of far-reaching challenges that have long beleaguered Ukraine's institutions. There are growing concerns that these developments may lead to protracted delays in implementing vital reforms that are essential for modernizing the energy grid and curbing runaway corruption within state enterprises. With the energy portfolio being so central to Ukraine's economic resilience, even in times when international tensions and domestic challenges are mounting, the news of political instability has reverberated powerfully through financial markets and among foreign investors. Recent statistics from the Ministry of Energy indicate that Ukraine's energy efficiency had improved by nearly 15% over the previous fiscal year, an achievement that now faces potential jeopardy as new leadership struggles to fill the vacuum left by the departing minister. Furthermore, the abrupt departure of the Justice Minister sends a strong signal to both domestic and international audiences that accountability measures, while critically needed, are coming at the expense of stability in key sectors. Financial institutions observing the situation have already begun recalibrating their risk assessments regarding future investments in Ukraine, emphasizing that political instability remains a significant concern. Nonetheless, amid discussions of economic setback and political caution, some voices within Ukraine have expressed hope. They argue that the current crisis might serve as the catalyst for overdue structural reforms, strengthening the nation's ability to fend off corruption and mobilize public trust in government. While such optimism remains fragile, it is bolstered by widespread public demand for transparency and decisive action, a force that, if harnessed effectively, could instigate a period of transformative change within Ukraine's political and economic spheres. Considering the broader context, the resignations come at a time when Ukraine is simultaneously grappling with geopolitical tensions and domestic reform challenges. International observers and partner nations alike have taken a keen interest in the evolving situation, with several European Union representatives and officials from the International Monetary Fund issuing statements underscoring their support for Ukraine's reform agenda while also stressing the need for enhanced safeguards against corruption. Over the years, Ukraine has received substantial financial and technical assistance from Western institutions, assistance premised on the principle of promoting good governance and economic resilience. In press conferences held in Brussels and Washington, officials reiterated that while assistance programs would continue, they would be increasingly contingent on demonstrable progress in rooting out corruption. There is an emerging consensus among international stakeholders that the success of Ukraine's energy reforms, and by extension, its overall economic stability, hinges not only on technical upgrades and infrastructural investments but also on fundamental institutional reforms that restore public trust. As Western experts noted in a recent summit on Eastern European economic development, the current scandal serves as both a cautionary tale and an opportunity for Ukraine to reorient its policies toward greater accountability. These voices of international concern are complemented by rigorous analysis from local think tanks, which have long warned that without comprehensive institutional reforms, efforts to modernize critical sectors could falter under the weight of entrenched corruption. For the citizens of Ukraine, whose optimism has been tempered by years of unfulfilled promises and recurring crises, the hope is that this unprecedented shake-up will act as a turning point. A moment when the forces for transparency and justice finally prevail over a culture of impunity. As the dust begins to settle on what has been a tumultuous week in Ukrainian politics, the long-term repercussions of these resignations continue to ripple across all levels of public life. In the short term, government insiders report that an emergency meeting of the cabinet has been scheduled to address both the immediate vacuum left by the ministers' departures and the broader implications for regulatory oversight in critical sectors. During these discussions, policy advisors and veteran bureaucrats alike have called for the swift appointment of interim leaders who can restore stability and signal to the public that the government is committed to taking decisive action against corruption. More alarmingly, however, are the lingering doubts among industry leaders regarding the continuity of reform programs that have been painstakingly initiated over recent years. Energy analysts, for instance, have warned that delays in appointing a successor to the energy minister could result in disruptions to projects critical to the nation's sustainable development, projects that have already received significant investments from both domestic sources and international partners. In a similar vein, legal experts expressed concerns that the departure of the justice minister might stall vital judicial reforms aimed at bolstering the independence of the legal system. These reforms, which have been heralded as necessary steps toward aligning Ukraine's justice sector with European standards, now face an uncertain future amid the turbulence of political upheaval. In a climate already fraught with skepticism, every setback is likely to be interpreted as a confirmation of deep-seated systemic issues that have, over time, eroded faith in the country's ability to govern itself effectively. Yet, in spite of these challenges, there remains a persistent undercurrent of resolve among many Ukrainians who are determined to see a future in which accountability triumphs and the scars of past corruption gradually give way to a new era of transparency and civic engagement. Reflecting on the unfolding events, it becomes evident that the resignations of Ukraine's energy and justice ministers are not isolated incidents but pivotal moments in a broader narrative of transformation. For decades, Ukraine has been engaged in a relentless struggle to redefine itself, balancing a legacy of historical turmoil with an ardent desire for reform and progress. The current scandal, with its staggering allegations and high-profile resignations, has unquestionably accelerated this process by shining an unflinching light on corruption that many believe to be endemic and irreversible. As the nation reels from the shock of these revelations, there is a palpable sense that the stakes have never been higher. The paths that Ukraine chooses to follow in the immediate aftermath of this crisis will not only determine the future of key policy areas such as energy security and judicial independence but will also serve as a litmus test for the country's commitment to principled governance. Throughout the corridors of power and the bustling streets of Kyiv, whispers of change are growing ever louder. Citizens, long weary of empty promises, are now demanding that their leaders demonstrate a will to overhaul a system that has for too long tolerated corruption. In this moment of introspection and crisis, the call for reform resonates with a renewed urgency, one that is echoed by trusted experts, opposition voices, and international allies alike. There is a collective recognition that, if Ukraine is to truly fulfill its potential as a modern democracy and vibrant economy, it must confront and dismantle the entrenched networks of corruption that have held it back for so many years. After careful reflection on the depths of the prevailing corruption and the ensuing political fallout, my personal stance is one of profound concern and measured urgency. The scandal that has engulfed Ukraine serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of institutions when public trust is compromised by greed and malfeasance. It is imperative that not only do we demand immediate accountability from those implicated in these corrupt practices, but we also insist on concrete reforms that address the roots of the problem rather than merely its symptoms. In witnessing the resignations of the energy and justice ministers, a decision born out of an undeniable need for atonement and reform, I am reminded that true progress can only be achieved when leadership is willing to confront its own shortcomings head-on. The path ahead is undoubtedly fraught with challenges, and the road to rebuilding trust and stability may be long and arduous. But letting corruption go unchecked will only serve to compound the crises facing Ukraine's government, its critical energy sector, and the integrity of its public institutions. In expressing my own perspective on these momentous developments, I call on all stakeholders, be they government officials, business leaders, or everyday citizens, to rally behind a transformative agenda of accountability, transparency, and sustainable change. The urgency of this reform is not just a political necessity. It is a moral imperative that transcends partisan divides and speaks directly to the heart of what it means to build a just, modern state. Stop the war.